the 3rd. It is 5:28, so we will get things underway. Everyone had an opportunity to review the agenda this evening. Any additions or revisions? Chief Gowdy.
I just want to add one in-camera labor item.
6.1 labor.
Surprise.
Very good. Everyone heard that? That's one of the few things that we do make motions for is for agenda. We can make it official, we can move on. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Very good, and I did not see an on-screen vote, but that was certainly passed, so thank you. We will move right into our reports, if we could. Director Piche, if you cared to head up the Fire Services Review, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So before Council this evening, administration is introducing the Fire Services Review. Joining us this evening is the team from Transitional Solutions Incorporated, who has worked with us on the project. So we have Vern Elliott and Aden Blackburn. And also joining us tonight is our Fire Chief, Dennis Cole. So when the city first started planning this review, we were in between our fire chiefs. The timing of working on this document was actually perfect, as it immersed our new Chief Cole into the fire service. Along with TSI, they took a deep dive into the department's operations and learned about the history of the department at the same time. This review was completed with Lacombe County's involvement, as they are a major stakeholder to the Lacombe Fire Department. And working jointly with them, this allowed the study to be funded through the Community Partnership Grant. There are 4 primary goals of completing the Fire Services Review. It was to define the appropriate level of service for the municipality and the surrounding areas, to determine a framework for evaluating possible locations of a new fire hall, to look for opportunities to increase the fire services financial recovery, and to consider the various governance structures for the fire service that responds to calls for service within the city of Lacombe and the portions of the surrounding area. The governance models encompass all of Part A of the document. TSI looks at many different governance models, and not all of them would fit our organization. However, there are situations where they all do work. The models focused on Lacombe were the intermunicipal agreements model, which broke down into 3 different opportunities. There's a regional authority, a mutual aid agreement, and a contract for services. Then the other 3 models were the Regional Service Commission, a society model, and an independent provision for service model. Of the intermunicipal agreements model, going into the regional authority, that is where there's an agreement that organizations will support the fire service, and budgets and contribution ratios would be agreed upon by all the municipalities. It's very similar to what we would have with our LREMP, our Lacombe Regional Emergency Management Partnership. It's not an official entity, but it works within an authority like that. The other one is a mutual aids agreement, and this is where organizations assist the neighboring municipalities. There's normally a standing agreement for the cooperative emergency management on a continuing basis, and often the agreements are reciprocal and don't involve a lot of cost back and forth cost funding. So, however, the size of the response may determine if there are costs that need to be recouped. At this point, the city does not have any mutual aid agreements within the organizations within the county. That is one of the recommendations that is made in the Fire Services Review. The last one is a contract for service. And what this does is that it involves one municipality agreeing to provide fire service to another municipality for a fee for service. And the one reason to adopt some type of model like this would be if one municipality has additional resources and can support another municipality with little to no resources. When studying our current agreement with Lacombe County, TSI reviewed all of our agreements, letters of understanding, and policies and bylaws in place. I do know that Vern and Dan have a PowerPoint presentation. At this point, would you like to introduce that and discuss the different governance models that we have reviewed?
Certainly, Diane. We can go through that. But I have to warn you, it doesn't really focus on so much the governance models. It kind of focuses on the fire services review as a whole.
Okay.
So if we're okay with that, we can proceed. Just going to bring up. Oh, sorry. I'm using Google Docs for the first time on a presentation, so. Let me know if that comes up.
Yes, thank you.
Get into presentation mode. So thank you for the introduction. Just quickly go our sub-agenda to council's agenda. Just shows the scope of the project as TSI understood it right from the beginning. We start off with our research and observation, go through governance and administration. We do an operational review to make sure that we understand how is the service meeting the requirements and the risk tolerance for council and the community. Of course, with that comes a financial review, and then we're just going to do a quick. You have the reports in front of you, hopefully, or have gone through them. We highlighted some of the recommendations, and then, of course, we'll have a question period. There's our team.
Can everybody see the presentation?
It's just loading so far. It says here on our screen.
Oh, yeah, it's showing that it's loading here, Vern.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be coming through. There.
So that,
yeah, I can see that one. Yeah.
is it just showing the slide deck as a?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not in presentation mode. It's in, but
Well,
we can see the slides though. The slide,
I guess
yeah.
you can read along on my presenter notes then, because obviously Docs doesn't work this way. So this just shows the scope that TSI takes with these types of projects. With fire services review, we are looking at for the present and the near future. When we look at master planning, which is another term that's used in a lot of the council reports and whatnot, we're looking more outside of 1 year, trying to help the department understand and predict with growth and whatnot. So as Dan talked, we looked at our current operations and kind of guessing with the projected growth. What does that look like? And of course, as council is aware, that part of that was on the station location, and we'll come to that. But as this shows, we look at many aspects that touch on fire services. First is bylaws, policies, and SOPs. Bylaws are the direction of the policymakers. You folks taking on that hard work of representing your community, and by the way, thank you very much for that. It's something that I'm always amazed that people step up like yourselves in establishing that. And with the bylaw is understanding, what does a fire service do? That's our job, is to make sure that you're getting the most factual information so that you can provide the best direction for the community in a efficient and effective manner. The policies and SOPs are more driving what the department does. And, like with anybody, you need a good instruction manual, and that's what those documents provide. So we do some work on reviewing that. Level of service is then, once you've kind of provided the risk tolerance, what levels of service do you have or do you require for emergency response, for fire prevention, for all the different services that the fire service can deliver? Training, once again, is more internal, but as we all know, that with the emergency response, we don't thankfully get to do this a lot. So that training is imperative in how do we prepare people to do something that we don't do every day. Making sure that they have the tools to do that and they understand how to use those tools safely. Staffing, of course, we look at to make sure that, and this is that quintessential question, and Lacombe was not immune to it, is where are we at when it comes to starting to implement full-time resources? And across this province, I can honestly say that there's a bunch of different models, and really it comes down to understanding your risks and how do you address that. And the same with equipment and apparatus. We look at that to make sure that, once again, that understanding the risks, does the equipment and the trucks that are rolling out the doors, do they meet that? As we talked before, the fire hall location. Records management is a big thing that we always look after the fact, and I will applaud this department and this organization for the records management. I personally haven't come across an organization that had such a vast amount of information going back for the last number of years. It made our job a lot easier in understanding, and I hope that that reflects it in the report, that we were able to do some things that we typically don't get to do with organizations of this size. So, Chief Cole and Diane have really worked on some stuff here, and I know Chief Cole is probably not wholly responsible, but he's the representative right now, so I'm giving him the kudos. Fire inspection and investigation, the best fire that a department will ever have is the one they don't have. And that falls into, the prevention, public education. So that's just the scope. So I skipped a slide there. It's just our research and our observations that drive everything after that. So we did reach out to elected officials in the exterior of the department, senior administrators, fire department personnel, and then, internal, that was all internal. External, we did meet with a couple of elected officials from the county and 4 senior administrators from the county as well. This was a collaborative approach to this report. And we, everybody was candid, and we had some excellent conversations, which allowed to direct our further research and gain our knowledge about the department. Right out of the gate, one of the things that was made very clear to us is the work with Lacombe County. It was evident that they were going to be part and parcel with this, and the city's desire to move to include fire services as part of the city operations. That was, there's been 4 other organizations that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 2 or 3 years. And the fire department typically sits on the periphery, that, they're an entity upon themselves, not part of the organization when it comes to elements such as HR. Even on the finance side, they're just kind of a necessary evil. It was very evident that this fire department was part of the city of Lacombe. And definitely a desire to establish a clear set of standard operating procedures and guidelines and how to get there. When we met with the individuals from the department, and I mean, we're talking the responders, there was a strong sense of mission. That's one of the things that we always love about coming into departments like this, is no matter what's happening with the politics, I'll say, of the fire service, with administration, that trucks will still go out the door with proud members of the fire service with a strong sense of mission, and Lacombe City was no different. Safety was a priority. We saw that in maintenance of the equipment, and with Chief Cole, just coming on as we were coming on, his commitment to doing that. And one of the things that Chief Cole and I were talking about this recently, in the short time that he's been there, he's ready to implement a full set of SOPs coming this summer. That's no small undertaking. And once again, the department as a whole should stand proud behind that. Another strength that we heard was in the training of the department. That was just some of the highlights out of the get-go. When it came to governance and administration, I have enough knowledge to make myself dangerous in a lot of different matters. One of them was working recently on a project with IT, and they have a thing called a maturity model for how does a department or how does an organization move through the use of IT, and how do you govern that IT? So I thought, hey, can we apply that to the fire service and working from a intermunicipal point of view? And I know there's a great framework in the province of Alberta of doing the same thing. And I guess just we took a crack at developing this maturity model, and finding out where the city of Lacombe and Lacombe County are, and trying to nail down where should they be. And where we landed was that's a decision that Lacombe County and the city of Lacombe have to make. What it comes down to is it comes down to the relationships that happen. I mean, we all know this. This is not rocket surgery. It comes down to the desire to collaborate, and that can be based on the relationships, and it might not be, as Diane pointed out. It might come down to resource profiles. One department might have more; it can provide more response, or a more capable response in the area. Might take a little bit longer, but it looks at that mutual aid piece. And where you are is that if there's no collaboration, departments just hover in their own little area, and that's all they take care of. But I mean, the desire from efficiency and effectiveness should be moving towards more of that high collaboration piece. And then there's the risk profile that also comes into play. It's if you have a highly industrialized area and the rest of your area is agricultural, it might not be a desire to move to a highly collaborative model, but there can be strengths. I used to work at Fort McMurray, where in 2016, industry responded to the community to protect it. So it can be done. It can be done at a very effective model. And I was a operations chief up there, and we were able to utilize those resources in a way that worked. Is that going to happen for every fire? I don't think so. I don't think it would be a very effective model. So it's just a matter of picking your way. And I'd like to say that TSI had the answer for you, but I think it comes down to the right people, the right time, and the desire to move up that maturity, that maturity model when you can. I have a conspiracy theory. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but I think at some point, as we've seen with Alberta Health Services, I would rather see areas like Lacombe County and City of Lacombe, Black Falls and whatnot work towards, and I won't say, I'm not going to call it regionalization in the fact of consolidating resources, regionalization and working together, because at some point, like Alberta Health Services, they just made a provincial model, and we all know kind of how that went. If we don't do it, at some point somebody might start to put focus on this, and we'll be told how to do it. And I don't want fire services to go the way of Alberta Health. So that's a conspiracy theory, though. It's not based on any data. And as discussed, we go through the operational review, and this is all internal to the department. When we looked at some of the stats, and I'll preface this with that the Office of the Fire Commissioner collected a lot of loss data up till 2016, which it is good data. It's locally representative of what the challenges were. At that point, when we looked at it from a fire prevention point of view, the city of Lacombe had a run of bad years. And I'm not a person that will ring the bell and say that trend is going to continue. But it definitely showed that the city with a more robust fire prevention program. Second to that, like I said, training is another thing that we look at when we look at the preparedness model. Training is a piece that gets us ready for what might happen. Like I said, these are skills that we don't get to use, so we should try to stay up on top of that. With city, that wasn't an issue. From a response perspective, some of the strengths and some of the stuff that we noticed was on the recruitment and retention. And another good news story is Chief Cole reported to us is that there's another 9 responders that are prepared to join here right away with the department. That was an issue that we brought up. We offered up some opportunities there, and Chief Cole grabbed on that and moved forward with it. And then the retention, I mean, with Chief Cole, with the SOPs, where it's headed, I don't think that's going to be an issue over the next number of years. There. And then one of the things that we did bring forward, and I'm sure we'll be talking about, is the medical first response. We did have a recommendation there, is that, like I said, recognizing where Alberta Health Services is, there are gaps in the system. And I used to work with the department. I'm currently working with the department where those gaps are evident in the capital region. It's up to us from a public safety point of view to, and I don't look at it as augmenting a system that was implemented on top of us. It's supporting our community. So we've got some recommendations around that. And then the recovery phase, like you say, goes down to that records management so that we have that information, so that we show council how the department is performing. Just show that, you said this was your tolerance for risk, and here's how we're performing on that. It drives that information out. Should drive every quality. Like I said, we're also touched on station location considerations, and as we work through this, we did use some of the I'll say the path data to drive what going forward. But it was Diane that brought this up. Just give us the considerations. So we used a model that's typically used in the fire service. When you pick a station location, recognizing that it becomes the one static element. Everything else, people, trucks can move around. Try to do that as carefully as possible, and doing that, understanding what's a safe location, and you can see all the rest of them there. I've been involved with 2 significant station location projects, and I can tell you on both of those, neither of those stations ended up where we thought they should be. And that comes down to these considerations. So we put this forward as, when the time comes, use the criteria outlined. So what you saw in the maps was not us telling you where to put it. It just shows the impact from, like I said, response performance, recognizing your shoot time, that in a paid on call model, where you travel to that. So it's, taking that in consideration. Then if it's a full-time department, like say our big major centers like Edmonton or Calgary, they're at an advantage knowing that there's going to be full-time people in there. It's just, where do you locate it for that? But in a case like Lacombe, we're trying to outguess the future, and Lord only knows what happens. And then access to major roadways. This is a unique element to Lacombe, is that little road to the west of you. It had impacts when we looked at the data, and with that median control fence in between, that causes some I'll say some response hazards. It causes some response obstacles in navigating that, and understanding from both from a dispatch and response point of view, is how do you get calls on the highway out there in an effective manner. Financial considerations, this as Diane pointed out, that it took a bit to work through this with both the county and the city, understanding how things were, there's been some changes, how wages and benefits, for example, have been doled out, how vehicles have been remunerated from the county, trying to understand upgrading and replacement based on that. It took a bit to navigate that. Dave McReynolds did an exceptional job in kind of laying down what he saw. Both the county and the city were excellent in meeting, and finally got to a good place. We have seen the county provide a new policy and how they remunerate firefighters. That showed that there was some good faith on their side to move forward. And like I said, once again, it goes back to that, how do you want to work in the future? That cost for service model is something to consider, but like I said, it comes down to who's at play right now and what are both departments moving to. Just quickly, like I said, this presentation, I told Diane, I warned her that her presentation is more about generating conversation, knowing this was a council committee of the whole. Our recommendations here, as you can see in my notes, this was from a preparedness and mitigation point of view, starting to develop a strategic plan for fire prevention. And what that means is just starting to understand your risk profile. One of like I said, one of my first loves is IT and the technology and how it can augment what we know as humans. Can't really explain it. There's a lot of great stuff being done by the fire underwriters. There's stuff down in the States that's being done using artificial intelligence. Not saying that you're there yet, but there's things there that help you recognize your risks in your community and around. Understanding the deployment and equipment required. This was an interesting one. It took us a bit to understand the deployment model, working with the county, but also working in the city. And at the end of the day, I mean, this report today is for the city. This conversation happened a few times where, I mean, the city has to be focused on the city. And how do you manage your resources to provide the community that is the city of Lacombe at large in that efficient, effective model, but also being a good partner in the region. We did talk about AFRAX radios. I know that's it's an interesting development over these last number of years. I can tell you in 2014, I was the biggest, I'll say, critic of the AFRAX. 2016, after Fort McMurray afterwards, I became a big proponent to the point that I was a representative on governance for the province, representative for the Alberta Fire Chiefs. So that's just proof that I believe in the system. I've worked within the system for the last number of years. I just put it out there, but it wasn't a focus until this new station comes in. We get that. The MFR, we did say that the city of Lacombe, like with a lot of other municipalities in this province, I think we're up to 70% of municipalities support the MFR. This is a program that AHS has done right, and especially in that central to southern region of Alberta, there's exceptional people. AHS is a system, and whenever you work with this or working against or with the system doesn't care. But I can honestly say with AHS, with the MFR, there's people that care about how communities in Alberta are protected. I would say that that's the city of Lacombe should seriously consider with our recommendations is providing a level of service for medical response through the department on medical first response. And if Chief Cole, as we go through the question period, might be able to provide a couple of examples that we heard where it's kind of a proof positive to moving forward on that. The precision in the budgeting, there was one, and it's not a huge criticism. There's some challenges there. There's just developing that understanding of where the budget is for fire services, and understanding the impacts of decisions. Okay. Things that we saw, like I said, the summer, the SOPs, that was a great news story. The SOPs are, when I was a young firefighter, they were the bane of my existence, but I've seen that we need to establish those lines. Like I said, it's the instruction manual for the department as a whole. And having a clear set that is that means something to the department is a department that's headed in the right direction. Recruitment, like I said, I'll just kind of reiterate that. The communication piece is, I know Chief Cole is having regular meetings. It was something that we talked about in our recommendations. He's grabbed onto that, and the proof is in, you know, that he's getting a lot of feedback from his officers and meeting with them. And it's not just soliciting feedback from the officers, it's soliciting feedback, it's providing feedback back to them about what's going on with the department. The compensation policy, as I mentioned before with the county, was also some implementation that happened while we were doing this project. So that is the end presentation. I can get that off everybody's screen. So I'll ask Mayor and Council if there's any questions or anything that Chief Cole and Diane would want to highlight that we might have missed.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. We appreciate that. Just from generating the information for the report, I see that, I mean, that's great that you talked to lots of staff members, some council, county, whatnot. Do I recall from your report that was there half of the firefighters that responded to the survey?
Yeah.
It
was right about, sorry, I can't see who's talking, so I'll just say Mayor and Council, that we had, it was over half, which in our world is an exceptional response.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I'll be frank with you, I thought it was poor, I guess, only because I thought that this was an opportunity for them to have input. I would have expected perhaps all but a couple, but if you say that that's outstanding, then I'm going to take your word for it. Chief Cole, do you have any explanation as to why only half of the firefighters would have responded?
Well, if you try and get a bunch of firefighters together and keep their attention span together long enough to do something online, if you can get more than half, you're doing tremendous.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And I heard a conversation when we first got on talking about soccer. I'm a soccer coach myself, and I can honestly say during COVID that the kids are not the problem. It's the adults to try to keep them at 6 feet. The kids have always, here's our rules, playing kids, and it's the adults. But yeah, Chief Cole brings up a good point. It was an exceptional response, and we did actually. We were able to follow up before all this COVID stuff happened. We were able to meet with crews to talk about the results. And Dan and I spent an entire day there into the evening and had some great conversations. So I like to say that we did get a good sense of where the responders are at.
Thank you. Council, any questions on what's been presented so far? Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So this is always a line of at what point in time do you justify, for example, assisting AHS. It's basically a flexing service where Lacombe gets picked on because we could have Sylvan Lake, Panoka, Red Deer, anybody else, and in the transition of the flexing, Panoka puts on 5,000 kilometers a month flexing to Lacombe. That's just one example, but I mean, when you get into the responding to EMS calls, is there another stage of liabilities as well that fire departments aren't willing to take on that responsibility? Because even, for example, I know Chief Cole's told me that we have some EMRs, but there is a significant step up from EMRs to EMTs, just like going from EMT to paramedic. And, you know, there's always the growth within the city to, you know, what's the call volume, what's the demand. And I know I've advocated for AHS to put another 12-hour peak unit into Lacombe, but for every full-time ambulance in Alberta, it's 1.2 million. So that's why they're going to more 12-hour peak units. So And just as like we've tried to encourage discussions on our current EMS infrastructure doesn't allow for another unit in Lacombe because they obviously want one for mechanical backup. So that's a conversation later to be had for hoping them to collaborate, like Olds built a interagency facility, and sounds like they're encouraging others, but is there some, what do you justify the liability to, because it's a big difference going into EMS calls?
Through Mayor to Councillor Ross, it's a good question. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll take it back to that tolerance for risk and understanding the data. AHS, I think you've seen the reports. You might even be probably more intimate with them than I am. They're not, I'll say they're as forthcoming as they want to be. How's that? Where I think Lacombe has the advantage is right now is get on board with the MFR. This is the Vern Elliott perspective, sorry. It's get on with the MFR, start to understand your data, which you're exceptional at recording, and then starting to see what kind of calls you're going to, what is the frequency, what is the impact of them. You know, making the leap to EMT, certainly not a recommendation at this time until you see that you know, that turnover point. And what is that? I don't know. You know, with aging populations, it might be sooner than later. You know, Lacombe is a great place. I hear it's a great place to retire. You know, what demographic does that bring in there? Those are questions that, you know, we just can't predict. But what we do know is that, like I said, is being a part of that on the outset is not a bad direction. It's a really good direction, actually. And, you know, I get what you're saying, and there's no easy answer. So I skirted the question, but tried to provide you with the best direction that I could. Is that at the end of the day, it comes down to council's direction and, you know, Chief Cole and Diane providing you with the best information on how they're addressing that.
Sorry if I may continue. It would be a big step because even at an EMR level, you need a lot of patient care experience before going into that situation. Because I have some. So yeah.
So if I could, Mayor, Council, if I could address Councillor Ross, I think we have to put it into perspective a little bit, and what are we willing to do? So what this is designed to do, basically in most fire services, is to do immediately life-saving procedures. So if that would be starting CPR on somebody who's in cardiac arrest, if it would be opening or clearing a person's airway because it's blocked, just these immediately you know, stopping some deadly bleeding until the ambulance arrives and transport is available. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about here. And of course, it's up to you to decide what level, or if any, that you want to provide for that within the city of Lacombe and within your region of the county. You know, if you look statistically at the large metro centers, Edmonton, Calgary, even Red Deer probably, you know, their call volume is 60% medical assist. Medical first response makes up at least 60% of their call volume. So the trend is there, and I don't think it's going to get any less. But like Vern said, you have to record it, see what the results are, what it may be costing you, and then you have something to negotiate with the province and kind of work through it that way.
So, Mayor Creasy and Councillor Ross, if I could just make a statement there on that one. One thing we're looking at with the MFR program is basically we're looking to stay within the MFR level, not advancing to EMR, EMT, PCP, anything like that. Stay down to the basically advanced first aid is what we're doing, what we're looking to do. We do have the benefit here in the fire department right now that we have 3 PCPs, which are full-fledged advanced or primary care paramedics on staff. We do have EMRs on staff. and we do have some MFR members as well. But the majority of our staff here is already trained to basically advanced first aid level. So this is the level that we're looking at trying to maintain to assist the residents in the city. And I'll give you an example. Last year, in my first year here with the department, we responded to two what they call echo calls. So echo call would be not breathing, not conscious. So two residents here in the city, not breathing, not conscious. EMS was delayed. There was no ambulance in the city, and they were delayed coming out of Red Deer. We made the choice then to respond because it was a resident that was basically not breathing. So we responded, and to today, those two residents are still residents of this city due to our response of coming out. Right? It was a decision that I made myself personally. Those two calls. Yes, we will go. There's a citizen in trouble and we don't have EMS readily available. So we're going to go and help out. This is all we're looking for, is just to maintain that level that we can give some initial advanced first aid, direction, support to a patient, to the residents of our community until EMS does arrive on scene. Hope that clarifies it a little bit.
Thank you. It does. We appreciate the information. It seems like as a department head, the chief, the only time the council gets to see you is to beach up at budget time. So we don't always get the chance publicly to thank you for the work that you and your men do. And there's two very important examples right there. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So just, if you don't mind, I just want to touch on another part of the MFR program. So there's another benefit to the program as well that Alberta Health Services provides to the department, is when it comes to offering our first aid training, CPR training, defibrillator training, all that, that is all, the cost for all that is covered by Alberta Health Services. We have an in-house instructor right now that is fully certified as a first aid instructor that was fully compensated by Alberta Health Services for that training, the certification. Every time we put off a first aid course now and going forward under this program, the cost of those courses are all covered by AHS. So as a little benefit to the department and the city, Alberta Health Services way of saying thank you is that they cover the cost for that stuff, right? So that's a little bit of a benefit for us there.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Creasy. I echo all your efforts. I guess my point is it's a big difference from a CPR class to actually doing a cardiac arrest code, and done many of them myself personally in the past, and it's the holy crap factor comes in play. But I mean, it's just, yeah, it's very real. There's a lot more things that happen on an actual patient than what's actually that's instructed in the class at times. So. But yeah, I think it's absolutely awesome that volunteers are willing to do it. It's a great experience. And I'll say for anybody who joins the fire department, it's a resume building and the life experience for them. And I applaud the AHS getting involved because it's only a win-win. Like you had two wonderful success stories, which quite honestly are quite rare when they're in full echo. But and those are, like I say, wonderful to have that success. But it's just I think there should be encouraged even to go on ride-alongs to get that hands-on patient care experience or shadow emerge, because it's, I'll like to say it's great to have it, but it is a big difference from the course to actual patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor Creasy, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just put some more into that, what Councillor Ross was stating there.
Certainly.
I will never put the members of this department in any undue duress, stress situation that they don't feel comfortable with. And all the members within this department know that. They know that's how I operate. If you don't feel comfortable doing something, I will never put you in there. So I've talked to all the members about this program. Yeah, we do have some that aren't entirely comfortable with it. You know what? There's more jobs to do besides doing CPR, holding wounds, holding C-spine, stuff like that. So we use those people in different areas, right? But there is a good appetite to continue with this program within the department for the residents of the city.
Director Piche, what's next?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just as a step forward on that. So right now, Vern has actually gone through a lot more than I anticipated. So thank you for that, Vern. I know Chief Cole does have some operations discussions he would like to make, some points he'd like to make there. And then we'll go into some of the next steps of where we move from here. So unless there are more questions from council.
Thank you for that. Yes, there is one from Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I am looking in the report, so I hope that's okay in terms of timing, but you brought up governance, Director Piche, and I kind of got mired in that part of the report. And under regional authority, I'm looking on page 23 of the report. And so the first recommendations at the top there, that the city and county should review compensation elements. And under regional authority, I couldn't follow all the bullets. Basically, when you get down, it's saying if you use this part of the population of the county to calculate some of the costs, or don't use this part of the population. I just didn't know what is being recommended there. And, or put it this way, what was the formula used before? And what is the suggested formula going forward? Or is this just still, I don't know, background information?
A lot of it is background information as to what it is. The model that we currently have doesn't really fall within one of these models. It actually is kind of a bit of a hybrid. We have some, I would say, mutual aid without the actual agreements of mutual aid at this point. And then we also have some regional authority because we work together within all of the other departments of Lacombe County. In terms of the numbers, I may have to pass this back to Vern or to Dan on that. Do you know regarding the numbers? I know that we don't support the entire county, so we had to take a snippet of the area that we do support. We'll go as far as Gull Lake to over to the east, not quite to Alex there, and then the north and south borders of Lacombe County. So if we were to have a contributing factor of cost for a certain amount, we don't want to take the entire county because we don't support the entire county, and that's where some of those numbers are coming out as not being I guess in line with what the full populations are. Is that accurate, Dan and Vern? Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it's based on your portion of the county that you cover, which is estimated to be about 3,500 residents within the county, and the service provided to that, and consequently the funding and the contributions from each side. You know, it's kind of a model as to what you could use. And I guess a demonstration as to what you could look at for sharing the funding.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Hoekstra?
Yes and no. I guess let's just look at bullet number 6 under regional authority. It says that we're using 3,500 as a part of the calculation. So the city would now contribute 79.98%, and the county would contribute 20%. But then it goes over to this 50-50 blended contribution or calculation. I was lost there. What are we doing there? How did we move from 79% and then we're back to 50 and 49 at the bottom? I don't know. I couldn't follow it. What am I?
Is there per capita versus combine?
I think Chief Gotti has some information on that as well.
Sure, so there's two separate calculations being discussed there. The second bullet from the bottom uses the entire county. The bottom bullet uses a subset of the county that is only related to the service provision by the city. And what they're doing there, first let me just step back and say, this is a theoretical discussion of what the funding of a regional authority would look like. It is not the model we currently have, so there's no tie to reality here. But in this theoretical discussion, you would need to take the entire cost of the fire service and attribute that cost to the county and the city using some method. So the first that's used is a equalized assessment approach, where you'd say, okay, the county and the city, we take the entire equalized assessment of those two bodies, add them together, the resulting percentages are, in that scenario, the county has approximately 4 times the equalized assessment of the city, therefore 20%, 80% roughly. Alternatively, because if you're the county, you would say, no, that's not fair. You should use population. And so then you come up, again, depending whether you're using the entire county or that subset that's approximately 3,500 residents, you come up with a different set of numbers. Closer to 60-40 on the population if it's the entire county, but of course closer to 80-20 if it's that subset. If you take those two methodologies for calculating the ratio of costs and combine them so that you say, we'll take approximately 50% of the ratio that would arise from the equalized assessment portion and 50% of the ratio that would arise from the population proportion, combine those two, that's the blended, the 50-50 blended calculation.
Now second.
And so, just so we're on the same page with the service models, there's the 5 different examples there on pages 23 and 24, is that correct? Okay. And then when we switch over to page 25, my sheet starts out partway through. I'm just wondering if there's perhaps something missing between those sections, between the service models and whatever is on 25, because all of a sudden it's into number 3. So just wondering if there maybe isn't a page missed there. I don't know how critical it is, but maybe you could check on that. Chief Gotti?
So those are just the different hierarchies of the titles, and so that is number 3 is a subtext. Number 1 being operational considerations, and then financial considerations of those different models. Number 3 is the relationship implications of the different models.
Okay, and number 2 and number 1 are where then?
If you go back to page 20, there is the
Prior to the, okay. Okay, I was, you had me lost there. Okay, thank you.
So I will ask Chief Cole then to discuss some of the points for operations within the department.
Yep, thanks, Director Piche. So just a couple of things that I want to touch on. I know Vern touched on a few things already, but I just want to make some highlights on some stuff. Since I began here last April 1st of last year, one of the biggest things that I was hearing from the members immediately was lack of direction, lack of rules, and the inadequacy of standard operating procedures and guidelines. I heard that quite clear from everybody. And again, when TSI came in and we started working with them, they identified it immediately. And myself and Vern and Dan had some good conversations about it. And we knew that this was a hot point that needed to get addressed immediately, right? So over the past year, took that, and the SOPs and the SOGs, like Vern said, is basically, it's our playbook, it's our rule book. This is how we conduct business. This is what we basically abide by in order for day-to-day operations. So hearing that so much from the members, yeah, that was the highest thing on my priority list then, was to get some consistency, some rules, so that everybody knows that when we go out the door, this is what we do. even before we go out the door, this is how we go out the door. Okay. So it's great to say that the SOGs right now, I have an officers meeting with the frontline officers of the department here following this one. We're going to finalize the SOGs that were created. And I think right now we're sitting at about almost 60 SOGs that are going to be rolled out and put in place by July 1 of this year. The entire department is excited about this because, like I said, it's the biggest thing that they've been looking forward to and asking for ever since I started here last year. So it's a big win on the department. It's a lot of work. Didn't really have a lot to go by. It was sort of, do we retweak what we have or do we throw it out and start from new? And that's pretty much what we did, is we started from new based on what we do currently. So it's a good win for the department, and it's a recommendation that TSI did put into their report. And hopefully by July 1, we'll be able to tick that one off as completed. So it'll be good. Another thing that came up too was recruitment. So when I started here, we were down at one point to 28 members on the department. So that was 4 crews, 4 platoons that we have here that encompass a captain, a lieutenant, and firefighters underneath each one, plus 3 chiefs. We're down to 28. Those numbers were pretty alarming when I first started realizing that, okay, we don't have enough people to be running the service. Were we worried about it? Not enough to ring any alarm bells, but enough that, okay, we need to start actively recruiting. So we did some major recruiting through Fire Prevention Week last year, and we ended up with, we have a class of 9 new recruits that as of this weekend coming, they'll complete their live fire training, and they will be on the floor ready to go here within another week or so. And just to add to that, right now I have 10 applications on file for our 2022 class. So the word is out in the city that this is where the cool kids are, and this is where everybody wants to be with.
Chief Colin, with those 9 additional members that are completing training now, then that brings your participation up to what?
So this will bring us up to 38.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we did have some members that ended up coming back. They were away from the department. They came back within the last year. And yeah, we took them back on. It was just paperwork, put them back on the force. But yeah, this is going to bring us up to 38 active members. So, which is, the comfort level is coming up pretty good when it comes to that. So another good solid year recruitment for next year's class, and we'll be sitting very well. Just another thing too, I know Vern talked about it as well, is mutual aid. So mutual aid between communities. So basically, if something happens here in the city of Lacombe, if it goes past our manpower, personnel, or equipment availability that we have here in the city to basically fight a large fire or any type of large emergency, being able to call on our neighbors is key to come and assist us, whether it be manpower, equipment, any type of resource like that. So there is no actual formal agreements on paper between the city of Lacombe and any municipalities surrounding us. But one thing there is there is some basically gentlemen's agreements between the municipalities around here that, you know what, like Vern said earlier, if somebody needs us, we're coming, right? We'll worry about the politics and the paperwork and all that after, but we're going to go help. So one thing that is in motion right now is there is an agreement being put together between us and the city of or town of Black Falls. I've had conversations with the fire chief down there, Chief Cote, and yeah, we both agree that, okay, it's time, we need to get this done. So the wheels are in motion to get that done so we can get that covered. So there is another organization within Lacombe County. It's called Elsi Mayo, Lacombe County Mutual Aid Association. So all of the municipalities within the county are part of the Mutual Aid Association, along with the industry partners as well. So we have Dow, Nova, Nutrient, some of the larger key players that can offer services for that are in that mutual aid association. So although we don't have anything directly written down between us and the municipalities, through the Elsi Mayo, the mutual aid association, if we need it, we can get it, and vice versa. If they need it, we can offer it through that program as well. So again, it's a large organization, and yeah, it's at the end of the day, we're going to look after each other, right? Just a couple other things that I had here was fire prevention. So I know council last year, I hope you guys recognize that Fire Prevention Week is held in the second week of October. And one thing, my background where I come from, fire prevention has always been number one. And when it comes to Fire Prevention Week in October, that is our week to take a key message and hammer it home, push it out there, and make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. Plus, it's also a chance for us to basically shine the trucks up, show it off, let the community be proud of what they have here in the event if they ever need it. We're just bragging rights to other communities to say like, hey, we got the biggest truck, right? That's the big competition. So when it comes to Fire Prevention Week, that is very large to me. So last year, yeah, we did some events around the community. I talked to several members here on the department, and quite a few of them were like, we've never done this before. So it's my mandate to keep fire prevention going. So fire prevention through activities in the schools, activities in the community, fire inspections for large occupancy buildings, commercial buildings, restaurants, places like that, right? It's a program that we need to start looking seriously into, because once we start increasing our fire prevention model and growing with it, then we're going to start to see our dollar loss when it comes to actual fires and incidents like that will start to come down, right? It's been proven that the more fire prevention activities the department and the community gets involved in, the less fire loss we end up seeing, because everybody's more aware of it, right? So even though we say it's our week in October to shine, we push it throughout the entire year, right? So it's just, it's something that we need to really focus on. And here in the past probably 6 months, I know I myself have been out doing fire inspections, getting lots more calls for it. Been in the schools doing fire inspections. Right now, our program is that it's either request or complaint driven for fire inspections. We need to get more proactive for that. So we need to get more involved, get it scheduled, get it out there a lot more previously than people waiting for people to call us and ask us to come and do it, right? So this is one of the things that, yeah, we're going to start pushing through to try and get the support and basically get out in the community and let people know that if they have a concern about anything fire safety, that they can call us, or if not, we're coming anyway, we're going to come have a look, okay? Again, we talked about the MFR program, Medical First Responder program. It's a big win for the community. As I stated earlier, we had a couple large successes last year, and please willing that it doesn't happen again this year, but you know what, if it does, we'll definitely be there to assist and respond and help out. So just to basically recap my year, my first year since I've been here, it's been a learning year for myself. Going through this report with TSI, their eyes were, they were reviewing stuff. I was learning stuff at the same time, learning about the city, the county, the agreements, and what we can do to improve to make this department better into the future. And with this review now, I'm excited about it. I'm glad that we can finally present it to yourself and council. And I just look forward to the years to come and the road ahead.
So can we take away anything from you organizing the dates for fire prevention along with the municipal election? Are we supposed to have some conclusions there?
I didn't realize it was the same week, is it?
Oh, you're just relatively close, mid-October. There may be lots of people out there that appreciate the two fitting together. That's all I'm getting at.
Well, when you go to vote, you can pick up your free smoke detector.
Perfect.
Or stop by the fire station for a hot dog and say you voted.
Are there any questions regarding the operations of the fire service review?
I don't believe there are at this time.
Excellent. Thank you. So the next steps for the organization as we move forward with this fire service, on the governance side, the one thing that we've been working with Lacombe County is our intermunicipal collaboration framework. And so what is recommended is that we reconvene our committee for that, and we move forward with Lacombe County to develop some master agreements for the fire service. We do have a lot of agreements that are in need of review and updating. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to work through that as our next steps for the governance model. On the service level changes, so if there is going to be any changes that that affect how we deliver our service out to the community, we will be bringing policy back to council. So all of the decisions will be based on council's approval. So the fire services bylaw and the fire service level scope of practice policy would be coming back to council for review and for updating if there are any fire service changes, such as something like the MFR. In regards to the internal operations, administration will review all of the recommendations that affect internal operations and the best practices. And if there are any further decisions to be made by council, again, we'll bring them back to council at that time, especially if it does affect the service level policy there. And then anything that is incorporated within budgets or that are financial implications will be incorporated within budgets. So on a yearly basis, of course, we will bring that to council as well. So on that, if I open up to any other questions, thank you.
Appreciate it, Director Piche. I know that this fire service is a huge undertaking. We appreciate your expertise, gentlemen, Vern and Dan, both for putting it together and provide a very valuable basis for us to make some important decisions for our community moving forward. So thank you for that. Does anyone have any further questions, comments? You've done such a great job. We don't even have any more questions. Thank you, everyone.
No, thank you. And I'm big fans of Chief Cole and Director Piche. They've been exceptional to work with. You guys are in great hands. I travel down through that area a lot. I have family in the area, so it always makes me feel good in this province to have people like them representing what we do. So it was truly a joy, and all the best.
Thank you. Given that his first work day was April 1st, he had a lot to live up to, so I think he's done so.
Right.
So I'd just like to say it's been a privilege to work with the City of Lacombe on this project, and we're still here. If you have questions, you know, we're just a phone call away. You can just give us a call. We're still around, so not going anywhere. So it was a pleasure, and thank you for everything.
We appreciate that. And be careful what you wish for. We might have more questions. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Are we okay to move forward? We move into 4.2. Very good. Director Thompson, I see has joined us on the line here. You sent out the roads asset management video for us all to look at over the weekend and provide a basis for today's discussion. So thank you for that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and good evening, Council. As Mayor Creasy said, last week, CIO Gowdy shared my pre-recorded video presentation providing an asset management update on the city's road network. The presentation summarized the extensive work in the financial analysis and infrastructure assessments completed in the city of Lacombe. Tonight, I'll just highlight some of the key points from the executive summary of the presentation and leave most of the time for questions and discussion. Between 2022 and 2030, we are currently budgeting a combined $18.5 million on roads renewal and upgrade projects. A total investment of $22.8 million is required to maintain the current overall condition rating, and support projected growth. This is a shortfall of $4.3 million, not accounting for inflation. We propose to prioritize roads spending where it benefits the most drivers and results in the most road condition improvements per dollar spent. This means the condition of roads with more traffic are likely to noticeably improve, but some roads in low traffic areas may still reach poor or very poor condition. It also means some roads that require expensive rebuilding may be deferred in favor of improving up to 4 to 5 times more roads elsewhere in the city. We propose to fund this deficit through a dedicated year-over-year 1% tax increase. A special paving tax provides the stable year-over-year funding source required to sustainably maintain our road network over time, including inflation and assessment growth. It took a long time for our road network to develop, and it will take many years to reduce and potentially eliminate the backlog. Administration is interested in Council's feedback on this work so far. Particularly, does Council agree with Administration's recommendation to maintain the city's road network at the current condition rating? The prioritization framework developed for the city favors projects that preserve roads over projects that rebuild roads, resulting in more good and very good roads overall, but also more poor and very poor roads on low volume roads. Is this an acceptable balance for the community? And Administration's recommendation is to fund the cost gap using a special paving tax. So at this point, I will open it up to any questions and discussion.
Thank you. Who would like to start? Councillor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. In some areas, specifically downtown, where we have some water tracking issues, would there be other areas of benefit financially to improve them areas of them roads faster than later? Because there would be other advantages to, you know what I mean? You know what I'm asking that appropriately?
I think,
Chief Gowdy, you'll start here, thanks.
So I don't think you'll ever like automate decision-making. When you're developing an asset management program, especially when you're looking at specific asset classes, it's going to look most closely at pavement. It doesn't consider what the underlying infrastructure quality is for water, sewer, that sort of thing. And so it gives you a sort of a starting point for the 10-year capital plan in terms of the roads needs. There is still a judgment and administrative discretion component where you look at what projects can be reasonably bundled, what the economic impact might be to adjacent businesses, or if there's spin-off benefits like you had suggested, where maybe improving a specific area might have an economic benefit for the city, improving a resource road corridor, for example. It might be a project like that.
So it's reasonable to say then that this doesn't necessarily take precedence over our capital works, whereby we were bundling several different types of infrastructure together to get the most bang for the buck. This isn't going to take precedence over that. It's just intended to work with it.
That's correct. It's a guiding, a set of guiding principles and a starting place to make those decisions. It isn't you press a button and it spits out the best capital plan for you. There is still a lot of discretion that is applied.
So Director Thompson, you were after council's input on the overarching philosophy. I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of disagreement with the fact that we need to do what we can to try and at least maintain, if not improve the situation of our roads in our community. So I think, unless I'm seeing any different, I think that's a pretty easy one. The prioritizing and whatnot, I mean, let's face it, for the vast majority, but that's not really a council decision as much as it is either accepting or not carrying some of your recommendations. I mean, let's get down to the big one, which is the special tax, because that's, I expect one where there'll be more input. Who would like to start there? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I wanted just a little bit of background. Well, first of all, your presentation was excellent. I really appreciated having that video, but I didn't catch the explanation how historically we had $299 per capita dedicated to this. And then we suddenly got, well, suddenly, I don't know if it's suddenly, then we became $126 per capita. When did that shift happen? And how come our attention wasn't drawn to that sooner? I don't know. I'm just curious about what historically how that came to where we are now.
So it is somewhat difficult for me to say when it specifically had happened. I think it probably happened over time, just as the priorities in the 10-year capital plan were reestablished over time. Just various other facilities projects, for instance, and other things took precedence in the plan overall, and that shifted roads and other priorities off the plan or further down the plan. And so with the development of these asset management tools that we're working on now, we want to be able to report these things in a clear way and understand them ourselves. And so by presenting this first iteration of the roads network, we want to be able to say this is the baseline, and from which we are going to be evaluating our road network and our other underground network items as well. And so council and administration has the tools available to make some smart policy decisions moving forward.
Chief Cuddy? I think it's also been a function of the fact that we haven't had as sophisticated of planning on the roads as we are building towards now. And so I actually expect, and Director Thompson and I talked about this, that it would be interesting if you could take a peek at the 10-year capital plan 8 years ago. I don't think they would have predicted that over $200 per capita for road expenditures. I think at that time they probably predicted much lower. But you're subject to these kind of reactionary projects that are not effective uses, or they're not particularly efficient uses of paving dollars often. So I think even if you weren't to adopt this, despite our projection being $100 and some per capita, I think you would actually spend closer to your historical spend. You would just be doing so in kind of a piecemeal, reactionary way. The other thing that's happened is because we haven't had this understanding of the backlog and the depreciation each year on the overall road network, is that Director Thompson is absolutely correct. What would happen is that you'd build your sort of must-have large capital items into your plan first, and whatever was left over, well, we'll see how much paving can get done for that much. And it was sort of a budgeting in reverse, budgeting by what's left over for pavement. This proposes to make pavement sort of a dedicated infrastructure class that has value to residents. I think having the paving tax, you can look at it as two extremes. I think the cynical, sort of fearful government, fearing large government side of me says, well, it starts out at 1% and then it becomes 5%. And then council in the future says, well, now we're meeting all our pavement contribution requirements. Why don't we cut our historical roads reserve contribution? And there's this sneaky edging up of tax that could occur if you're not vigilant. The optimistic side of me, administrative side says, well, but it's full transparency where you have to account legally for where that money is going. And so residents, when they say, well, what's this going towards? You have to be able to demonstrate that that's going towards the roads. And that, I think, has value too, as long as you are vigilant in the future, or we are vigilant in the future and say, no, the paving tax does not replace the city's historical investments in roads. It augments it to achieve that at least the same level, if not a little better, in the future for roadways.
ICR road network is probably one of the most important core services that we have in our city. I say one of, because there are many, but it is a very important one, and probably one that, as mayor, I hear the most compliments about when we allocate funds to road improvements, and probably the least opposition to the spending of those dollars in that realm. So I guess that's something, certainly something to consider. I don't know what other council's input is on that item, but it is an important one for me. I think that the overall value of this exercise here to try and quantify where we're at in the road infrastructure game, if you will, is an important one. I think that deep down, I think everybody knows that tend to kind of slip a little further behind in building maintenance, road maintenance, all those types of things, and especially as your overall capital assets grow, that it just keeps chipping away and never goes away. Not unlike maintaining an aging household or a vehicle, that's the same kind of thing. But regardless of what, if any decisions we make with this, I think this is very important for us to realize, and making this council and future ones aware where we're at is an important step in knowing what kind of resources have got to be allocated to keep this from becoming a runaway problem, not just a big problem like it is now. Councillor Dodson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just have a question regarding this process. Are we going to do this with our sewer and water system too?
So yes, that is the plan, is that the asset management program will be applied to multiple asset classes. So far, we have walkways and roadways complete. And so we will be looking at those additional asset classes in the future. In water and wastewater, I would say our primary or our more short-term goals are going to be around characterizing those sort of revenue-less components of the service. So that being the lost water or the inflowing sewer. I think that's where there's likely the best financial value to be achieved. And then looking at comprehensive life cycle analysis after.
Yeah, and that's the part I'm interested in as far as the life cycle goes, because you would coordinate this with that to ensure that we're not putting new pavement on an area you're going to do the following year, right? So I think this is really important. And as far as putting direct funding to pavement, I would be happy to vote for that, as I feel it is one of the most important parts of the services we do provide. Also, I think that we could probably find some savings, and they talked about the wastewater and water. We find those savings, and that can be applied back to these services. So I'm fully supportive of letting people know exactly where these dollars are going to.
I think if we could, I think it's important just to touch on the fact that the difference being between those other utilities, if you will, is they're intended to be self-funded through the rates, as opposed to roadways, which are, I guess, not wholly borne by municipal taxes, but wholly borne by taxes, period, through the provincial, federal, whatever it may be. So a bit of a difference there. Still, it's important exercise to go through with for those other utilities, but kind of a big difference there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we often, the other thing we see with roads is that there is a really optimal time to make investments where you get a better return on your dollar. While there is some rehabilitation activities you can undertake on roads such or pipes, sorry, such as relining or resurfacing of some of the interior of the pipe, it's much more of a linear degradation over time rather than sort of the plateau and then a steep fall off where you'd see with the road.
And generally speaking, significantly longer timeframe too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, I like almost everything about this. The CAO's point about seeing both sides of whether or not this is going to lead to bureaucratic creep or administrative clarity. I suppose I could foresee a scenario in the future where even if the road backlog is brought up to perfect, that having a tax in place for so long, probably whatever council is in place at the time is going to see fit to, reallocate it to whatever infrastructure backlog needs to be updated. So I think frankly, having the clarity, as you mentioned, of citizens knowing that this tax is going for this, if anything, that would provide whatever council of the day, very clear feedback as to whether or not that is wanted in a particular given year. And it's been a bit of a refrain lately. I always hate saying it. My only problem with this is, I guess I'm not convinced that we need it like immediately right now because of all the nonsense going on. I don't want to say the word, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay. And that's the only reason for that is I'm just not convinced that we are totally done with triaging our finances yet and seeing where the dust is going to settle and where those, what we need to put our money to when it's all said and done, when we see where everything lays. But as soon as that's done, I'm essentially I'm essentially 100% behind this model for sure.
Appreciate your comments. Just, I guess, the one small thing as far as reallocating the funds. I think when funds are garnered from a special tax like this, I don't believe it's really up to council's decision to reallocate those funds. If the funds were collected specifically for a purpose through this mechanism that was discussed here, they must in fact be used for that purpose.
That is how the legislation works. However, I could envision a scenario in which you framed that, not you, a council would frame a decision by saying, for the purposes of red tape reduction and streamlining the administrative processes, we're going to consolidate what's always been passed as a special tax and a regular tax into just one regular tax, and we'll no longer have to pass that extra tax bylaw, and it's all more efficient, raises the same amount of money, and then we do it with one budget. And that's why I say you really do have to be vigilant to make sure you're watching the dollars, and that doesn't happen if that's not your intent.
Councillor Jacobson?
I guess to be clear, Mayor Creasy, what I meant was, at whatever such time in the future that the backlog was completed and everything's all great, that the population having been taxed at 1% for the last 8 years, council at the time said, well, that worked great, let's make another special tax for sewer backlog or something. Right. We wouldn't going at this, is what I meant by that.
No, and that's fair comments. I think that it would be nice to expect that we could foresee a time when we did get up to a point where we were up with rebuilding infrastructure. I doubt I will live long enough to ever see that. But it's kind of it's a wonderful target to aim for, but this is an ongoing thing that I think it would be unrealistic of us to suggest that there is an end date to that. Still important how we move along the road, so to speak, but there's not an end date in infrastructure replacement, in roads or anything else for that matter. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So my question, I think I would have, I didn't get a chance to pull it up, but I would have liked to have seen in conjunction with this, just the 10-year capital plan for roads, just so I get a sense of what, because I can remember so quick. I guess my question, as far as the 10-year capital plan goes, is the road improvements on C&E north of the roundabout still on that plan? I think it is. Is it not, or did we remove that? I can't remember. CEO Gowdy, can you remember?
I believe it currently appears on the 10-year capital plan, but the latest recommendations from Stantec are to defer that portion. But actually, I'm going to defer to Director Thompson with the mayor's indulgence to step into the directing seat for a minute.
Yes, CEO Gowdy, you are correct. It's currently on the plan, but the current recommendations from Stantec looking at the city's growth in the north and in other areas of the city are that it does not need to be upgraded to an arterial standard within the 10-year plan. However, due to its condition, it still needs to be paved. And so the $7 million thereabouts that is currently in the 10-year plan, we would propose to reallocate to the roads program, including paving Sini Trail, but not widening it.
Makes sense.
Okay, if I can follow up, Mayor Creasy. So really then the shortfall that we have and the 1% tax really doesn't address that particular road as it should be then. I mean, you're just talking about repaving the 7 million, correct? Is that?
The 7 million would have gone towards upgrading. That was the intended purpose in the 10-year capital plan.
Okay, okay. So then on that note, so let's just say the 10-year capital plan follows Stantec's recommendations. So then do we foresee less than 1%? Or are we just going to leave it at 1% and then apply that funding to other roads? Is that kind of the plan there then, or?
So with a 1%, well, with the funding, the average funding that's required to fund the road network improvements, we would maximize every dollar to maintain or improve the road condition overall. And certainly with a 10-year plan with a long list of roads projects, we can look for opportunities to advance projects if it made sense to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I too am very much in support of this, but yet I'm looking at it also from how do we talk to citizens about this? So our citizens tend to always say our taxes are really high. We're going to add a percent now to it. We can show where that percent went. Roads, beautiful. But do we have a communication plan if we go forward with this? I'm just thinking way down the road, how to explain where all the other taxes are going very clearly. I know we've done it in the past, but somehow it does not seem to be convincing the citizens that I think most would say, aren't we collecting enough already as it is? And we should still be able to do this. I know it's not 100% on topic, but.
No, but I think it's very honest. I don't think we ever received much input that says, gee, you sure aren't collecting much for taxes. We wish we could pay more. I mean, that's, it's not something we hear often. So fair enough to bring it up. And Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of the comments that are here, so I wouldn't reiterate them. But I do have one additional I don't know, timing factor, I guess, that I haven't heard brought up before, and that's the fact simply that we're at the end of a term. And I am a bit hesitant to make such a significant change right at the end of a term. So for a new council to come into, I think this is outstanding. I was definitely a proponent for asset management when I attended sessions on that at AUMA. I got very excited thinking this is definitely an area that we need to go down. I knew even at the last election that there was, you just know there's a deficit, but you can't point to it because the numbers don't exist. I mean, that was the whole point of this. So I'm really glad that we've done this. And I do think that after we've had a chance to talk with residents, with ratepayers about, what we're thinking about doing and why we're doing it. But I get nervous at the idea of thinking that we're going to implement this for, budget 22. Like it just seems too fast. It seems like almost railroading, and I think you'll get a lot of negative pushback on it, even though it's actually a positive thing, and I think it'll make a big impact on on residents and ratepayers, you know, day-to-day life. They always say that, of course, local government has the most impact on people's lives on a day-to-day basis because you're living in it, right? So I definitely would voice support for a lot of what I've seen here, but I worry about the timing and definitely, you know, rolling into that with COVID because it just makes everything more complicated. We can't engage like we want to, like we need to. And I guess I reiterate that this is a significant change. And I think it's too fast. Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm curious to know how much of the 1% how much does it take of the 1% to replace the loss in MSI in the future? Like, if we didn't lose what the province is saying is going to be reduction in MSI, could have been like, I guess the way you try to get the message across to citizens is the reduction in MSI has to come from somewhere. And I guess, like, you know, could have the increase been 0.25 or 0.5 if we didn't have the reduction in the MSI that the province has stated?
I haven't done that direct comparison to say, you know, what does the 1% year over year look like over this period versus the MSI loss, but certainly, yeah, there would be you could look at it that way as an offsetting, there's been this reduction and
well, and then as information to the citizens, this is what we're receiving less of, and this is what mathematically the city needs to contribute to catching up or to maintaining within the loss of provincial funding.
I really would have to look at it. I don't remember what the 10-year shortfall on MSI was using their new predictions. I can look into that and get back to you though, as to this being a $4.3 million shortfall, the MSI shortfall being whatever it is. I'll have to look. I don't have one.
That's just a way to get the message across, stating that this is almost what has to be done to replace losses of revenue from other areas because of province is going to have to tighten it. So it's just deferring it from what we would have got provincially, that the local municipal taxpayer is going to have to pay for what the reduction in the provincial government is going to be funding different departments. Sorry, I didn't mean to complicate it, but it does kind of make sense.
Director Thompson. Oh, just a second. Councillor Connick.
Sorry, there you are. Just a couple of comments just from the last two councillors. One, I don't think there's a direct correlation with MSI at all. MSI funding is more than just roads. So I think this is about a commitment to taking care of our roadways over the next however many years. I know we could. There's a very real chance we'll see a reduction in MSI, but this isn't meant to offset that loss. This is simply about a 1% tax to try to look after our roads. If we lose MSI funding or whatever the case may be, we'll deal with that. But that's to me, there's no correlation there at any rate. And then as for the timing, I agree in a way, but in a way I don't. I mean, we can't put everything off because it's an election year. I mean, if we put it off, that's another year lost in terms of revenue. Yeah, it might be an uncomfortable talking point during the election, but I mean, if we stand by it, I don't see it really being an issue. I just think we have to be careful that we don't want to put 30 things off for the next council to decide on when really those decisions are certainly within our purview to make right now.
Chief Cuddy.
The projected 10-year MSI funding shortfall was about $4.6 million. That does use a number of projections, of course, because the MSI program is only confirmed to be in place for 3 years. And so we don't actually have projections out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But using our best estimations, they actually are. I agree with Councillor Connick. MSI is for a host of infrastructure classes, and so they don't directly correlate. But in terms of the shortfall in in both areas, they're roughly equal, 4.6 to about 4.3.
I know it's a kind of a bizarre question, but would you have any historical information, approximately how much of MSI went towards roads over the last 5 years, or is that, I know it's kind of a weird thing to have at your fingertips, but it's.
Director Thompson, do you have any information about our expenditures on roads for the last 5 years? Just total.
Overall, yes, but specific to how much of MSI funding went to roads historically, unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me.
I'm not sure how much of your MSI went towards roads, but I am quite confident that a good portion of the roads was funded from MSI. Almost the entire funding source, other than the $220,000 that you've historically contributed to the roads reserve, everything else that you've spent, which is probably $1 to $1.5 million a year, would be coming from MSI.
Yeah, I can certainly say that historically contributions or the expenditures to CIO Gowdy's point were 90% plus on average from grant sources for the roads program. Just looking at it as it's debt and grants primarily.
Which would be federal gas tax.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just some clarification for me and maybe people that are watching. This tax would come into effect next year, is that correct?
It would come into effect whenever
we want. So I mean, everything I see, it says 2022.
That's what we have modeled it on.
So I mean, if we continue on this line, we could have that go through to next year's taxes, and there would be a full year of debate or whatever, or public input to get a feel for what's going on with that based on this model here, because so I didn't see anything 2021, everything's 2022. There would be a lot of time to adjust or cancel it.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. A full year, I'm not really quite sure I understand that concept, because we're already in 2021. We're going to be setting the 2022 budget shortly. So you will have to make a decision one way or the other. That's why I'm concerned that it's actually a relatively short timeline. But I do appreciate Councillor Connick's comments, and he's done this a long time, that you know, it certainly is within our purview to do it. And I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, but again, I just feel that it's a bit quick, and with COVID, it's just, you're not able to do what you would normally do in situations like this, and that's really engage with the public. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Can I respond to that? Sure. Thank you. Well, I think that we would still, even now, would we not be able to make adjustments at this point next year to it? Or would we be, so we could adjust it if the public input was, we don't want you to do this, you could make adjustments even now.
Yes, I think Councillor Hibbs' point is that you start deliberating budget matters in the summer right away, where you're pointing out, sure, you start debating it, but it is really not passed until the spring amendments are passed and the tax rate bylaw is passed, and it's passed, which is really the spring. And so it's sometime between a short 3 months and nearly a full year, depending on your.
I totally agree that this is not the right time to do this, but it is, to me, it's put it in the plan and then make the adjustments if things don't work out the way we want.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to the concept, but I just find it a little ironic that we would be discussing a tax increase at the same time we've been discussing foregoing penalties and foregoing payment of taxes and whatnot, because families are struggling, and to implement another tax, albeit a very modest one, comes across as a little tone deaf to me. I like the overall concept, And it isn't to chase it down the road, kick the can down the road further, so to speak, to get it past the election. That really isn't it. I think that a year down the road, hopefully things are a little better outlook economically for many. Bit of a guess that way, but I just think that it would be better implemented or well, there's no problem discussing it now, and I think bringing forward an educational program to people to say what the proposal is all about and roll it out to people and have an opportunity to discuss it is great. I think we all know how a new tax is going to go over. That doesn't make it wrong just because it won't be well received publicly. But for a lot of the reasons that have been discussed here tonight, I just think that the timing is extremely difficult and would not go over well, is my expectation. More so than what it would normally. But valuable information nonetheless, and as I said, I'm not opposed to the concept, and provided that we can run a fine-tooth comb through it and make sure that the funds are used wisely and go towards improving the day-to-day lives of our citizens. Let's face it, there's an awful lot of people out there that are going to like this plans because of what it's being used for, and that can certainly afford it. On the flip side, there are those that it's a lot more difficult for. So, given our current quandary, I just think this is a little aggressive to put it into next year's budget. Anyone else? Director Thompson, did you have some concluding statements or additional information you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's one comment I do want to make on the underground utility network, because I think it is important to layer on. Because we know that we are moving towards additional investigation and asset management planning in the underground utility network in the coming years, such as like the flow monitoring of the I&I issues in our sanitary system, which will be underway this spring, for example. And in some cases, the underground utility mains may require replacement or rehabilitation, and that will require roads as well to be rebuilt at the same time. And ideally, the roads that need to be rebuilt are roads that are also in poor condition. And so as we advance our asset management initiatives towards the underground utility network as well, we are going to be looking for opportunities to reduce the number of poor condition roads as well. And so that work is still ongoing. And to CIO Gowdy's point earlier, this is not intended to automate good judgment, to automate good policy decisions, and to automate good engineering practices. And so hopefully it does provide council and the public a baseline from which to make some good decisions moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Thompson. And I think someone had mentioned earlier they appreciated the video. I think that really was a great way not only to accelerate the conversation here, but just to break it to people. So good job on that one. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chief Gowdy, anything else on road asset management plan for this evening?
Nope. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you. And the next item up, looks headed by Chief Gowdy, is the alcohol consumption in city parks, the final of 3 in our reports to committee.
I apologize if that is identified as me. Actually, Director Pichet has been working on this for a couple of weeks. And a week, I should say, I guess.
A week.
And so she'll be taking it, and I can help with any responses that you may have for questions.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and CEO Gowdy. So before council tonight is the responsible liquor consumption in city parks. Council has requested that administration provide information to review the legislation and impact of allowing liquor consumption in city parks. In June of 2020, the province of Alberta passed Bill 2 that changed parts of the liquor or the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act. What this legislation does is that it removes unnecessary restriction on liquor sales, allows responsible drinking in parks, and is supposed to cut down on unnecessary red tape. These amendments do create clear legislation and gives communities direct control of their jurisdictions. So what is needed to have the ability to consume liquor in a public park? It really isn't a lot, but it has to be that we designate picnic areas. They have to be a set area that people are aware that they're within that designated zone to be able to consume that. And then, of course, we have to set hours of when liquor can be consumed. The parameters, as I said, must be designated and they should be easily identified, but they also should be known as to when you're outside of that area of where it is prohibited as well. These legislations and these changes, they do allow for communities to set their own standards and what they would like to see for public consumption. One of the things is that the Alberta Parks has announced that they are allowing liquor consumption in certain areas, and they have restricted it to campsites, specifically designated provincial day use areas and picnic sites where liquor is prohibited or permitted, sorry, not prohibited. The city does not have a bylaw or part of a bylaw that prohibits liquor consumption in public areas at this time. So therefore, we would default to the provincial regulations to manage liquor consumption in public areas. The authority to enforce Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act will reside with the Lacombe Police Service at this point. Our CPOs in bylaw enforcement are CPO2s, and they don't have authority under the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act at this time. They are in the process of moving or training for CPO1s as the province eliminates that program of CPO2s in December of 2022. Aside from that, at this point, if there are any questions, I am happy to take them.
Thank you. Chief Cuddy?
One thing I did want to note is that the city of Edmonton recently enacted a pilot project that will allow consumption on certain picnic sites within designated parks from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. There is a mix of first come, first serve sites, and then some that are bookable for a fee. If this was something council wanted to consider here, we would also recommend conducting a pilot project for this year to see how it goes within select sites, and that you would limit those to first come, first served, as opposed to a booking for a fee system, which we don't currently have in place.
All our picnic tables are being used.
So I guess just to clarify then, this isn't on all city property. This is on parks, not on playgrounds, not on school property, not on any of that, trails. This is specific city parks, correct?
That is correct. We really would have to designate the area that we would allow liquor consumption. So I used an example in my memo to council there of using Les Walker Rotary Park. So when you go into that area of that park at the back of Mitchner Park there, you know you're in a certain area of the park. Once you go beyond those limits, then you're in a prohibited area where you would not allow consumption, say. And like I said, this is just an example I'm putting forward. It really is to have people understand that there's certain areas that it's allowed in, and then of course certain areas where it is not allowed in. And we're trying to make that control there.
Okay, thank you. So Another example might be the LMC South grounds from 5 to 11 p.m. on Wednesday evenings. That kind of
Music in the park.
thing. What a coincidence, yes. That would work out nicely. Councillor Gibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I guess that's one of my biggest questions then is just, where do you see this even being applicable across the city? Because so many of our parks per se have playgrounds in them, and I just don't feel that that's appropriate myself, or you're going to find a lot of support generally for that. But yes, the LMC would be one other example, I guess. Can you think of any other areas, like just off the top of your head, that could potentially be appropriate?
Len Thompson Fish Pond was one that I thought of as well. It's a picnic area. There's a gazebo there as well as picnic tables around there.
So if in fact council was interested in pursuing some sort of a test program for a year or two or whatever, however that would work, is it in a park or a bunch of them, or is it a time thing? What's the parameters there?
That is exactly the direction we're looking for. Thank you.
So much for shuttling that one out there. Councillor Hoopstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. It's somewhat minor, but signage, like how costly is signage? If you've got to put it very clear, this is where you can, this is where you can't. Like, is that kind of prohibited in this too, or not?
Judging by some of the invoices and the signage that I've done, I would say at LMC, you would be looking at $2,000 if you had to put it on both sides. But the entrances would be a reasonable guess. I mean, it's certainly a cost. I don't know that we need to do the 20 locations, but I mean, there's a few. For me personally, I think that is the one that I have heard from the public at large prior to this being brought forward, is specifically for music in the park for a few hours in the evening on that Wednesday evening. Is one that I see value in at least trying. If in fact we're able to have a music in the park this year, but I think that would be one worth pursuing. In my opinion. Councillor Jacobson.
I mean, obviously I'm in support of this. Director Piche, would you, like, if council were to consider, I mean, would council need to consider a bylaw then? If we already, okay, we wouldn't need to consider a bylaw. So would we then just, would the methodology then be to simply have a package that literally listed every single eligible park space, and then council went through and debated the merits of each one, and if any were to make the list at the end, that would be essentially what the pilot project would entail for the year? Is that kind of what you would be envisioning for how administration would need information to proceed?
Yes, I would actually recommend that we look at picnic areas, because that's what it says in the legislation is designated picnic areas. Then that way we're really limited to some of our locations then, such as down by Michener, the lower Michener Bowl, that could be another area. The park by the LMC there, Len Thompson Fish Pond, those are, there's actually designated picnic areas within those spaces. So what I would recommend is that we would change or amend the parks and facilities bylaw to speak to which areas consumption would be allowed.
And then once those individual areas were a little clearer as to where it's in the city, then we would go about picking and choosing dates and times and that type of thing.
Absolutely. We could bring forward an amendment with suggestions, and at that time, council can debate as to whether they want one area versus another or all areas. But again, we have to specify a picnic area, so it would be within those. And again, we wouldn't be doing a clean sweep across the city at all. It will just be specific areas.
So Council, is this something that we're interested in pursuing, given that it will entail some work for Director Pichet and others? Councillor Good?
Yeah, just a question. I am in favor of it. I guess my only question is, would we be, like, for example, let's use the LMC. We've talked about potentially music in the park. I guess I wouldn't be overly in favor of making it just Wednesdays. Like, I would rather that the rules be sort of uniform across the areas that we do go ahead and pick. Like, for example, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and that would be for each of the locations 7 days a week. Do you know what I mean? So that it's just very consistent and it doesn't set people up for failure, and it's just easy to anticipate what's going on. And if, I don't know, if an area becomes a problem, then maybe it gets dropped off the list. I don't know, but yeah, I guess that's my only comment, is not to make it overly complicated by having it, this is different than that's different, and this is only a single day and that's all week, and yeah.
Councillor Jacobson?
I was just gonna say, I concur with Councillor Hibbs, because I think if you start to get too prescriptive with times and whatnot, then you create the potential for false negative feedback on something, that is not necessarily related to the policy of alcohol consumption, but other things, right? So if it's a pilot project, just designate the areas and the times of day, and then see how it goes, kind of thing.
Very good. Chief Gowdy?
So we did have some conversations with the chief of Lacombe Police Service about this as well. And one of our initial thoughts was, what about having signage that's deployable at times of the city's choosing? So sort of like A-frame signage that says from, on today from this time to this time. And he brought up those same concerns and said actually enforcement is going to be really difficult, and people are going to really push back if you're trying to be that selective and control it. You need to have just a designated time and allow it for the designated time, because enforcement they would see as very difficult otherwise.
Councillor Gulleton?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I agree that the timing has to be uniform across, not changing. So if we're going to pick a time, let's do it for all the areas. I think we could get away, if it's a pilot project, we don't need fancy signs. Let's do temporary signages that are out there for, the whole time, but they don't have to be fancy. We don't need to spend a lot of money on this to find out if it's really what we want to do. I think we will in the long run. I think we'll want to have this. I think it's a great idea, and it's been long overdue. And enforcement will be enforcing the activities of the people, not the fact that they're just drinking.
Councillor Gibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Sorry, I keep thinking of things I meant to ask. So I do like the idea that this is called responsible liquor consumption, because of course that also is going to be part of this, and I think that needs to be brought to council when this happens. Is on the flip side, there are laws about how you're meant to be conducting yourself in public, right? So public, being intoxicated in public, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that would be a nice addition to a further memo when this does come back, is just sort of not only educating us, but the public as well, as what the actual expectation is when we're talking about, responsible consumption.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So just to ask that question, this only applies to liquor consumption, not cannabis use?
That's correct.
And is that a provincial, has that been stipulated provincially as well?
I believe that it has, but we'll check with Director Pichet.
Yes, that is what it is. Under Bill 2 of the Act, it was specific to liquor only.
However, the province does delegate the authority to the municipality if you were to, if you wanted to allow consumption within designated picnic areas of cannabis, you could do that.
Councillor Jacobson?
One step at a time.
Yes. Please.
I guess more of a procedural question, since this was my initiative here. CAO Gowdy, do you want then a notice of motion for next meeting, or how do you want to proceed with this procedurally?
It's an interesting question. A lot of the council procedural bylaws I've looked at does allow an additional motion in the committee of the whole meetings, which is to refer an item to the council, to the whole council for a regular meeting. We don't actually have that as a permissible item in the procedural bylaw. So either a notice of motion given at the May 10th meeting for debate on the May 25th would be one way, or we can take council's direction, and as the CAO bylaw permits the CAO to set the agenda, I can bring this forward. We'll have to look at the agenda to see whether it would be May 25th or June, because I know we are working on a few other things that have some deadlines as well, but we can get it late May or early June for sure, in either case.
I would suggest that given council's relatively clear direction on certainly wanting to proceed with this, I don't think that we need to go through the formality of a notice of motion, but thank you for bringing that up. It's pretty obvious. Certainly there'll be some fine bugs to work through. I expect Director Pichet, but I've got a pretty good feel of what direction that we'd like to move on this item.
Certainly do.
Very good. We appreciate you bringing it forward, Councillor Jacobson. So, we do have an outline of our upcoming meetings. 2 regular meetings, naturally at 5 p.m. on Monday, May 10th, and Tuesday, May 25th, and then again a council committee meeting that is scheduled at 5, as it is in here on June 7th. Is that one that requires some adjustment, or are we okay with that time period? So those will all stand at 5 p.m. unless we discuss otherwise in the future. I believe that's all of the regular business up to it, excluding the in-camera item, unless I'm mistaken. You are correct. Councillor Hoekstra?
I make a motion to move in camera.
Very good. All those in favor?